Okay, we're connected. And this is Here Now with Steve Struggle Panther Elder and myself, Dr. Abraheim Weisfeld of the Jewish Socialist Bund, which is now recognized as a legitimate, topic of political discussion and concern as a result of Molly Crabapple's bestseller book, The Story of the Bund, that has just appeared. So here we are. And we were just talking about the Ukraine and the mass protests happening all over the place, by the 20-year-olds. And what this is a prelude to. There's talk about a coup, as
Yeah,
you mentioned.
right.
There's talk about the dismissal of the defense minister for some reason or other, that's unmentioned. But the young people there, they certainly know what they're doing. But what are they, what are they trying to achieve? That's unclear. It's not announced. We don't hear that in the news. Because Ukraine is supposed to be on the side of the news broadcasters here. And now the young people evidently are not in favor of whatever is going on there. But we don't know what. It'd be nice to get, an interview with some Ukrainian revolutionaries, real revolutionaries. The anarchists that I know uh, who are Ukrainian are all sucked into this national chauvinism, incredibly reactionary anarchists, actually. They don't even deserve the name, but who knows?
Well, I have an interesting story here. I'm sure it will boil the blood of many people.
Hmm,
That's okay. It should boil the blood. I'm gonna see if I can share. It comes from Israel, so that's always a blood boiling
hmm.
um, situation there. See if I can. Let me see if I. Well, no, I don't want to share it yet. I'll just say it because the share thing is not working again.
Hmm.
There's a movement of afloat in Israel. The Israeli regime is advancing plans. What are they going to introduce at the prisons? I'll give you one guess. They're going to introduce something in the prisons.
What a
Not
noose.
better food, not better health care, not
Uh,
better housing. They're going to introduce an animal, not dogs. What animal are they going to introduce?
oh,
It's going to make your blood, it's going to make your skin crawl. Alligators.
what?
According to
What?
Press TV, according to Press TV, the Israeli regime is advancing plans to introduce no, crocodiles into
Uh-huh.
prisons in an effort to prevent Palestinian abductees being held illegally in jails from breaking out of the facilities. So they'll create a mort. So
Oh,
no, so they'll create a mort outside the jail, and then they will put the alligators in the mort. If you come out of the jail, alligators will eat you.
wow. So, where does this come from? Like, are they afraid that the Palestinians are going to break out? Have they been
Yes.
breaking out? I've only heard of one breakout about a year ago,
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I would love, but I saw it this morning here on Press TV that they're considering putting alligators on the outside of the prisons.
Wow. Sounds like they're desperate. Well,
It's,
they've got a lot of prisoners, and I guess they have a limited number of prison keepers. Yeah, so I think the number of Palestinian prisoners is at least 10,000, with about 500 children.
it seemed to me somebody could go to the United Nations with a little bit of a just with a little bit. Hey, look what we're going to do, and because the U.S. and Israel are merging their budgets. That means the United States is going to be financing alligators outside the U.S., outside of the Israeli prisons. Huh? Pretty, pretty
Oh,
sick, I'll tell you.
yeah. There's a woman comrade in Nablus who just got released from prison. I didn't even know that she was imprisoned once again. She was imprisoned a couple of years back, and after about 6 months, she got out. And now I hear she was in prison again and got out again. But I didn't even know that she was in prison. It's so frequent, it's so sort of casual, normal. Like 70% of all Palestinian men in the West Bank have been in prison. 70%. One time there was an academic colleague of mine, Dr. Yusuf El Haq in Nablus, who was imprisoned, no charge, administrative detention, they call it. That's a British term from the British occupation previously. And I got to participate in an academic seminar at McGill University here in Montreal. And so asked to intervene. And I started off by mentioning that my colleague, Dr. Yusuf Abdul Haq, was imprisoned, and calling for his release and asking for the other academics, to take note and to call for his release as well. And there was a Palestinian professor there on the panel who said, yes, of course, he should be released. And he said that he himself had been imprisoned. And so all the other straight academics from McGill, like suddenly sort of, twitched because they're not supposed
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah. They start twitching, acting like, "Oh my God, you're in prison. Why am I on the stage with you? You'll ruin my career as an academic." That kind of crap, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's pitiful, the state of
It is
academia.
pitiful. It really is pitiful.
Yeah.
It's worse than pitiful. It's just pathetic. These
But
guys, oh no, you're in prison. Oh no, how could I? You must be, whatever slander they want to throw on you because you've been in prison.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, it's too much.
yeah.
It's just too much. But yeah, they want to put alligators outside the prisons.
Hmm.
See, that's not going to make the New York Times unless somebody makes the New York Times print the article because the revulsion of just hearing that. I mean,
Yeah,
my God, what's going on here?
yeah,
I
weird.
mean, it's
Very
just
weird. When
weird.
people,
Weird is a nice word for it, but
yeah,
remember that there's always been these complaints about the soldiers raping the prisoners and abusing them. Well,
yeah,
apparently there was something to it because only
mm,
a very devious mind would say, "I'm going to put up as some alligators outside the prison."
mm,
And probably a moat or some kind of waterway that you have to swim through, you know,
mm,
what I'm saying, to get outside the prison. So
mm,
you have to swim through the water and get eaten alive by the crocodiles. Oh
mm.
my God, this I don't
It's sort
know.
of,
It makes you want to shiver, you
yeah,
know?
but this kind of insanity, all of these reports, are indicative, of a collapse of rationality. This regime is, going down the drain. I mean, it's still got its power, it's still got its support base, amongst the Jewish Israelis who don't know better because they aren't, informed by their television news about very much. So they don't even know, like how many Palestinians, have been killed in Gaza. That type of information is not transmitted to the Israeli public.
Well,
So,
well, let me show you an image now from Lebanon.
hmm,
This this should be showed on by to the Israeli public. That's for sure. We have an
mhm,
image right here. Now, this is a school, the Al Mahdi Secondary School. Okay, here's a picture of the school standing. There's the school.
mhm,
Okay, one more picture here. Top of the school, standing. Top picture. School was destroyed yesterday. There's a school now.
oh,
The entire school was destroyed.
wow.
I said the same thing. I
This
found
is,
this looking on some open source intelligence new websites.
oh yes,
And
Lebanese news and Osint.
yes, this is from Lebanon, OSINT. This is from
Wow.
Lebanon.
This is a cultural genocide.
Exactly. I wanted people to see that. Let's one more time. Let's that's one picture. One more time. Let's look at the school. Here it's
Yeah.
standing. Okay.
Big
I've
school.
yeah, very big, very big. Look at it standing. All the buildings, the fields, the roads,
Yeah.
pretty big secondary school, grades either 6 through 12 or 9 through 12. Okay. But that's another picture, another story in a second.
That's what did
But
it.
now it's all gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at that.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Destroying a high school. So what they want to do to South Lebanon, what they did to Gaza. That's the
Yeah.
only reason you would do this.
Yeah.
Is destroy the infrastructure. And to me, that's a sign of genocide, or at minimum ethnic cleansing. It's
Yeah.
totally allowed. It's just like when the U.S. bombed the girls' school in Iran, totally
Yeah.
allowed.
Yeah.
No reparations, no UN conversations, no rallies against it, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully, there were no children in it.
Yeah. Oh, it's indicative of the
Yes.
mentality of the West, which couldn't care less if all the people of the third world, were eradicated. Like that would be,
Yeah.
like perfect for them. They could just go in and take their oil, as Trump, terms
Mhm.
it.
Right.
The people, like are just an obstruction. They're just in the way.
That's
So
in
you
the
get rid of
way.
them, and then that's everything else is, for the taking. It's called looting. Looting is a term that comes from India. It wasn't originally an English word, but the British were obliged to adopt the word as an English word, because they had to have some sort of way of describing, what they were doing. And what they're doing was stealing all the personal belongings of all the people in India that they could, as well as the country's resources. Oh my,
Yeah, yeah, this is a real shame, isn't it?
yeah.
And I just randomly saw it this morning on the OSINT Lebanon um, um, Telegram channel.
Nobody else has reported on this.
Very, very little, very little. So we're
Yeah.
we're first here. Now, why do I have this image here? According to the same channel, the U.S. This is a McDonnell Douglas very secret airplane. It's only used for special operations to drop off people, to drop off leaflets. It's a very special airplane run by only by the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. So two of these planes had not been in Lebanon for 16 years, no, 11 years. So according to the OSINT data, they made two stops in Lebanon today, one in the north and one in the south, dropping off somebody, picking up something. So something is going on in Lebanon that these planes are there. It's only used for special operations, special plane used for certain kind of things. I also got that from the OSINT Lebanon channel. So something is clearly going on in Lebanon. They're burning, and um, Israel has also, I'll stop the sharing now. Israel has also said that their cabinet has met this morning or yesterday, or met recently, and that they're going to get back in the fight in Iran. So although there's a story here that says that the U.S. CENTCOM has claimed it is now going to stop its attacks. That its attacks will stop, have stopped.
Oh,
They had attacked Iran for the last 7 to 8 days,
yeah.
and they have stated, at least according to the story I saw on Press TV or another channel this morning, that they're going to stop their attacks. CENTCOM has said their attacks will stop. So I guess
Mhm.
what they're going to do is tag team Israel, and now Israel's going to get involved. If my story is true that I read, there's a cabinet meeting about this about um, Israel is going to get back into the war with Iran because they have been focusing mostly on southern Lebanon. So
Mm.
that's another story I want to share. that we might see some tag teaming with the U.S. Getting back with Israel getting back involved with
Mhm.
with with OSINT with the war in Iran because they have been conspicuously absent for a few days, for a little while.
Mhm.
Anyway, something else for you might want to take a note of here.
Yeah.
Um, that the that the Russian government is really increasing its stated desire to build peaceful nuclear power plants in Africa, but there seemed to be some kind of problem with getting them built. So these are stories I just came across this morning that I thought were interesting for our listeners to know about and viewers to know about.
Mhm. Well, there's some.
A whole school destroyed. It's just to the ground.
Mhm.
Very few buildings were left standing.
There's some kind of logistical mobilization happening. Like resources are being pulled into the Western Orient there, as if, the stage was being set, for some sort of major
Yes, yes, I agree. Yes,
initiative, and despite, what CENTCOM says about, stopping the bombing,
right, right,
nonetheless,
right. True, true. Very, 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 very true. I saw that somewhere else that it seemed as though that the type of attacks that Iran suffered this week were designed to prepare the ground for an invasion. The certain kind of defense defense um defense how do you say it material like radars and other things like that were knocked out, and the writer was saying that those usually preclude some kind of invasion or
uh,
something major being planned. Again, that
yeah,
tag team with Israel
yeah.
that very well could be part of it.
There was some bombing in the Northwest as well, which I think was targeting bridges so that the Iranian military wasn't able to mobilize into that area, which I think is the site at which the United States expects to be able to get some boots on the ground. And there, it's not American boots, that are going to be put on the ground there. And Trump himself referred to friends who are going to do it, who are going to move into Iran. And what he means is the Kurdish forces, Peshmerga forces that are already there, 3,000 from what I heard once, and are probably going to mobilize more. Now, Iran, bombed the training sites for the Kurdistan militia that
I
is
heard
preparing
about
to
that.
invade Iran on inside Iraq, just across the border, because they anticipate that this is where this invasion is going to be coming from. But the United States still seems intent upon proceeding with that and sending their Kurdish friends into the meat grinder of war. So that's and we talked about this previously, and it's always the failure of the third world, countries that are trying to modernize, quote unquote, by becoming nation states, which means that their constitutional model, ignores national minorities, like the Kurds. So, along comes the United States pretending to be the savior of the national minority involved, the Kurds, arming them up and sending them off, to fight, for U.S. interests, and pretending that this is going to grant the Kurds, some sort of independence or autonomy under U.S. tutelage. Well, the same thing happened in the Spanish Civil War when the Republicans and the anarchists refused to liberate Senegal from the empire of Spain. Okay, so the monarchist Spanish forces, counter-revolutionary forces, went to Senegal and said, "We promise you independence if you come and help us defeat, the revolution there in Spain." So Senegal sent all these forces, which were decisive, to defeat the Republican Revolution, which had been elected into the government. Okay. And afterwards, of course, they didn't give, Senegal its independence. So again, a national minority like that of the Senegalese in Spain are used as an arm of reaction and counter-revolution. The United States is using the Kurds as an arm of counter-revolution. And, the model, of course, is Israel. Israel is, the arm of the United States of America using a desperate refugee population to colonize the territory that had been previously occupied by the British Empire, which was under duress, and which was setting the stage, for the Zionists to take over in place of the British occupation and occupy Palestine to the benefit of the West, which Israel is part of, even though it's situated in the Western Orient. So again, like the national minorities in the world are manipulated, to operate on behalf of some imperial power with a promise of, uh, of, uh, of some kind of, resolution of their status as a minority population. So, the model of the nation state is what is at the root of the problem of why the third world revolutions are not advancing, because they're being undermined by the manipulation of national minorities in those countries, which could have been integrated into a federated society with a constitutional model that guaranteed representation for the national minority and guaranteed their national cultural autonomy, like the Bund says, national cultural autonomy. So they don't do it. So they set up their own collapse as a result, and that's what I think is the objective of the United States now to use the Kurds, in Iran, set the stage, for U.S. occupation thereafter. Well, let's see what happens. But
That's a very daunting prediction.
yeah, yeah. But of course, you have to look at the worst possible scenario because that's what the imperialists, are banking on. So, you can't look at the situation saying, oh, how wonderful, Iran is standing up to the United States. Yeah, well, for the time being, yes. But one has to find some way to make sure that this is going to last, that Iran is not going to be undermined in the long term, even though in the short term it's doing okay. So,
That's a very important point. That's a very important point.
yeah,
Yeah, because the um the the motion of war goes back and forth.
oh, yeah.
Um,
Like, Trump is not giving up.
no, he's not giving up. No.
And he has to come up with some kind of a victory in order to win the midterm elections. Like if he comes across, appearing to be victorious, then he'll get a lot of votes, right? Because, the one who's victorious is the one who's right. And, you stick with the one who's victorious because then you expect to get some sort of benefit as a result. Because as they say, like short-term pain for a long-term gain. The objective is, long-term gain. And if Americans are deluded into thinking that if they align themselves, with imperialism, they're going to get some sort of a benefit out of it, well, they'll do it. That's the way people are, selfish, self-centered, lacking culture. That's the difference between the East and the West. The West has the wealth, but not the culture. And the East has the culture, but not the wealth. It's the inverse. And this
Here,
big worldwide
here,
divide, like is has to be resolved some sort of a way. There has to be a collective, mutual aid happening on a world scale and not just in a neighborhood.
here's an image, a story from Telegram about what you were saying about the some of the transportation infrastructure that have been hit by the U.S. against Iran. Some
Hmm.
tunnels, some bridges, yeah, bridges, yeah, yeah. So they're really hitting a lot of roads to make travel to the site or to prevent people, the army and people from moving to away from certain areas. So I just want to just reiterate what you're saying with some images here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I wanted to bring to your attention today to some of my work, that I put 10 years into composing my doctoral thesis, specifically to resolve the matter of how a society integrates its minority population
Mm,
and avoids, the national chauvinism that is
mm.
the nature of the bourgeois nation state, which of
There is.
course is the European, disease, and the and what nurtured the development of Nazism. So, I mean, Nazism claimed to be German nationalism. Oh, that's a form of German nationalism, all right. But how they define the German nation is another matter. Hmm. So, if, like the political philosopher Herder mentioned, if you define Germany as a culture speaking the German language and its, various dialects, then that's one way of defining national identity in Germany. The other way, of course, is to define German national identity being based upon a Christian baptismal certificate, so that citizenship and identity is bestowed by a priest of one religious denomination or another. And if you don't have that benediction, then you are nothing. You are, fluff that can be disposed of easily. Now, the proof of my contention is that the Jewish people of the East, even in Poland, spoke Yiddish like I do. Ich kann reden Yiddish. Yiddish is our language. But where does it come from? It comes from the Ruhr Valley in Germany, near the city of Worm, and it is called Mittelhochdeutsch, Middle High German. That is, from the northern part of Germany in the Middle Ages. Okay, Mittelhochdeutsch. Now, if according to Herder, the common German national identity based upon language, that means that East European Jewish people were German just as much as any other German person, not in terms of land, not in terms of citizenship, not in terms of religion, but in terms of language. Okay. But that definition was rejected by the Nuremberg laws of the Nazi regime, which declared that citizenship was only based upon religion. You had to be a Christian to be German. And so everybody else, well, like Jewish people, were eliminated. There's one exception to that, in that the Roma in Germany, they were called Sita. Even though they were Christian, they were nonetheless eliminated because they came from an Oriental origin. So the criterion of a religion was used to differentiate between Eastern and Western cultural origins, basically, because Jewish people are Oriental as well, except that the Jewish Ashkenazim in Germany were half Oriental, that is, half Semitic, and half European, because there were no Jewish women available in Europe for the Jewish slaves and merchants that were brought into the Roman Empire at the time. So, like the question of identity is crucial here, and this is what I addressed in my doctoral thesis. I'd like to show you the um, content table of contents, to give you an idea of what is involved here.
But thank you. Thank you very much.
And where
This
is
was
it? Here it
very
is.
informative. Very informative. Oh,
This is crucial, because we have to make a revolution in theory, in political theory, before we can make a revolution in practice.
oh,
But,
oh.
like the movements, the populist leftist, movements, have not even taken that into consideration. Like they're, satisfied with repeating the cliches of whatever ideology they are comfortable with that they know of, and anything else they don't want to
So
know.
true. So
It's,
true.
it's not the same as what they already know, and they figure that, oh, they know everything already. They don't need to know anything more. Okay, well, here's the more. Second edition, nation, society, and the state. So I differentiate between each of these three concepts. They're concepts. A nation concept, a national identity, a society, not a land, but a society. That is a society made of people, and the state. The state is something added on top of all of that. Didn't exist always, but the nation always existed. So nation comes first, not the state. Hmm. Okay, so then we go down the hill here. Okay, doctoral thesis at the University of Quebec Montreal, second edition with modifications and additional annex. Yes, the strategies for Palestinian liberation. And I do a critique of Judaism, Judaism unchanged. And I find that Judaism has been manipulated over the ages. And when the what's called the Old Testament or the Torah was rewritten by a guy called Ezra. And nobody notices, like what he sort of, injected into the text, all the genocidal stuff, was not there originally. And the Samaritans living on the mountain, Gerizim at Nablus, they used the original Torah. And they have it available in their museum there, to see in the original Hebrew uh, primordial text, because the Hebrew lettering came afterwards. The original Hebrew was written, with characters that looked like lines at various angles in different combinations for each letter. But what came afterwards, the block text alphabet of Hebrew that we see today was borrowed from Phoenician, from Lebanon. That's where that lettering came from, not from, the Israelites themselves. They adopted, they learned, from the Canaanites, how to establish a more elaborate language because Hebrew, was a primordial Hebrew came from Mesopotamia, Iraq, with Abraham and his clan. And it developed into something more, but, the Israelis don't know about this. Okay, and the subtitle here is The Reconciliation of Palestinian and Jewish Nationhood. So I established the concept in political philosophy of nationhood, which was never talked about before. Okay, oh yeah, this is me in 2012. Okay, now this work, helped to develop a Jewish opposition, which has now taken form, and and the fruit of all of this decades of work is exemplified here. Nearly half of young American Jewish people, forget about the term Jews, that's a racist term as far as I'm concerned, are functionally anti-Zionist. Functionally anti-Zionist, even though they do not realize it themselves, because they either support a one-state solution in the various generations here, 44% amongst the under 35s, one state solution, like which is being promoted, like which doesn't have any content, because the people promoting it have not defined it and don't know how to deal with Palestinian refugees. But nonetheless, okay, it seems, to exemplify a consciousness. Is Israeli annexation, 22%, 17, 26%, 19%, and two separate states, two-state solution people are 54% overall. Majority of Jewish Americans support the recognition of Palestine as a state. It's right there. Okay. And then amongst young people, you can see, the variations here. Two-state solution. Wow. Even amongst the older generations, two-state solution is still popular, but the Zionists will not admit this.
Man,
Okay.
the Zionists. I'm still thinking about the school we just saw destroyed.
Hmm.
I mean, that shows you what Zionism is about to me.
Yeah.
the rubble and the rubble in Gaza.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. I mean, you have to look at its. I mean, you have to look at its most most galling and destructive aspects because that shows you how far someone will go. How far will you go away from against this moral values? You know,
Mm.
killing babies,
Mm.
bombing schools, um, cutting off water, just bombing roads, destroying this like I was, yeah. I think I'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah, we could get into an analysis of how the Zionists justify all of that. And they have their justifications, which are insane, but it can be analyzed, but not here or now.
Right, right.
Here we go. Okay, to continue here. Okay, the
Yes,
volume one, nation and civil society. So civil society, has is a term that comes, from liberal theory, but the liberal theory, Rousseau, etc., nation state people
right.
like France, the Republic, the sacred Republic of the West,
Mhm.
they talk about civil society, but to them, civil society is part of the state. It's what the state treats. The state is above civil society. But I reverse that. I flip it around. So civil society becomes the Constitution and the state is dissolved and civil society becomes independent of the state. But right now, civil society is subordinated to the state, which is the problem. A society and a state, counterpose the two, and I explain why they're counterposed. Whereas in liberal theory, they're the same. So I destroy liberalism here using original liberal sources and developing a proof in deductive logic. So we start with the Greek and Roman eras and what society meant then. Modernist perspectives, that's liberalism. The civic conception of the nation is another matter, in which citizens, civilians become the determinant factor and not money. Ethnic conceptions in German political theory. This is an analysis of how Nazism came to be. Why did Germany turn Nazi? It's because of these people: Hegel, Fichte, Trischke, and Marx in his pamphlet of 1847 called The Jewish Question. Marx attacked the Jewish national minority, pretending to be a German like other Germans. Well, it didn't work out that way. And Marx called for the uh, disappearance of the Jewish people because they were supposed to assimilate into the German society. Well, Einstein tried, like Einstein himself, testifies, he considered himself to be just German until he was subjected to, the chauvinistic sectarianism and suppression of his theories. And Henry Ford, even subsidized an organization in Germany that was the anti-relativistic, organization. And they had a whole organization and a campaign trying to denounce and undermine the theory of relativity. You know, so Einstein, said, "Wow, I guess I better be concerned about, like my national identity." And at first, he became a Zionist, and then he realized, Zionism is just another statist movement, and he quit Zionism, but a little too late. Hannah Arendt as well. She started off as a Zionist and became an anti-Zionist. Many, many others, in what was called the cultural Zionist movement. Um, Yahad Aram, others, that you don't know about. Okay. Then I get into a critique of anarchism because anarchism doesn't recognize national identity. You're supposed to dissolve your national identity. How are you supposed to do that? If you only speak one language, you're supposed to give up your language? Really? Okay, gone. Liberal democratic state. The difference between unanimity and majoritarianism, huh? Hmm. Like liberal republic, says the majority rules. And that's, like democracy or rule of the people, people's power. Okay, in other words. However, the political parties come in there. One political party supports the aristocracy, the old aristocracy, the conservatives. The second party supports the national bourgeoisie. Hmm? And they contest, amongst the population. And the population can choose between one class or the other. And, like they have the freedom to do so. However, when the working class got the vote, because at first they didn't have the vote, only property owners had a vote. So when the working class got a vote, finally, they put together a working class party. So then there wasn't a majority anymore because there was three major political powers, parties that divided the vote amongst them. So no one could get a majority. Okay. So what do? They end up, with rule by a plurality. So here in Quebec, like we have governments, that are ruled by 38%, of the popular vote of those who voted in the first place. So where does, majoritarianism go? Where does, democratic majority go? Goes out the window. It doesn't work. Hmm. But nobody talks about this kind of stuff, like it's not important. Now, international relations, between nations, because international is usually used as a term to deny the national identities of the various nations. Huh? So, have to reverse that as well. So, how do we do that? Using the federal principle. Who did that? Proudhon, the anarchist. But he's not like the other anarchists, who dissolved, identity into individual, personal, selfish liberation. Hmm. No. Proudhon, he was more sophisticated than that. He talked about a society that was federated. Okay, so begin with that. Then we have the good example of the Iroquois Confederation. Here in Northeast North America, the Iroquois in, I think, 1306, developed a federation of the various nations, five nations confederacy. Then they added on a sixth, six-nation confederacy, each with their own territory. And confederation is correctly used there to denote, territorial autonomous regions. All of this, like stuff that's so important, but, the regular sort of university studies and Marxist theorists, have no idea what was going on. Okay, so we go into analysis and a critique of the various Marxists. The, uh, the, uh, the second, third, and the fourth internationals. Okay. The first international, of course, was a combination of the Marxists and anarchists. They were in the same international, but it was the Marxists who split the international and expelled the anarchists and formed the second international, which was only the Marxists. But, Marxists, they don't know about this. They don't realize, that they were in the same international as the anarchists at the beginning. Just like, the communists don't realize that they were in the same Russian political party together with the Jewish Bund when it was the Russian Social Democratic Party. And then the Bund got expelled, and the Marxists took over and destroyed their own project. Globalization, Leninist Federation of Soviet Republics. Okay, so Lenin's theory of self-determination, very important to consider. That's where Ukraine was recognized as an autonomous nation, but only under the Communist Party Ukrainians, like Khrushchev. And then Khrushchev, of course, asked for the eastern territories of Russian-speaking peoples to be added on to Ukraine in order to, who knows what, logistical reasons in the Civil War, for his personal sort of aggrandizement, whatever, but that's, a, a problematic matter when it comes to the point where Ukraine started setting up its own nation state. And so, defined the Russian-speaking national minority as superfluous. And the only thing that they wanted, out of those territories was the industrial base and the resources and the people they couldn't care less about. And so they invaded them until they were repulsed by the Russian counter occupation, which is now succeeding, and practically has liberated all of Lugansk and Donetsk, which has only 15% of the territory left to liberate. Okay, so then we get into the methodology of national identity. Yeah, this is, more abstract stuff. Okay. You can see the titles there. Now, here's a whole chapter just on one concept because it's missing. We have rules-based order, we have international law, we have the right of self-determination, but what happens when you have two rights of self-determination that confront each other? What happens to Palestine? You have the Arab right to self-determination, and then along comes, the Jewish refugees from Europe, claiming the right to self-determination as well, which is legitimate. And they use their right of self-determination to deny the very same right of another people. Okay, so that means you have to have something that is more fundamental than a right of self-determination. It's not enough. You have to have a principle of reciprocity so that the right of self-determination is operative, for all concerned. Otherwise, it's just a big contradiction. Next, different perspectives, what I was talking about before, the difference between the Oriental and the Occidental perspectives on nationhood. And then this is the big chapter. This is the critique of Zionism. Zionism is nationalist ideology. Elements of the Torah, the hierarchical notions that were introduced into the Torah. Torah is the Old Testament, but just the Old Testament, the first 5 books. What's added on afterwards is not considered to be, in Judaism, it's not considered to be, original. Like a Book of Kings. That's the kings. Who wrote. Okay, international relations of antiquity. Okay, then we get into civil society, territorialism, reciprocal method, conclusions. Okay, societal organization, development of civil society. Okay, and then here's the information. The Confederation of 5 Nations of 1390. 1390, it is the correct date. And the whole text is right there. It was written down. This is not, like an culturally underdeveloped population. I mean, they may not have been, as technologically advanced and rich, like Europe, from imperialist plunder, but they were, much more sophisticated than Europe. Then, okay, and I wrote up, the Confederation of Second. I wrote up a description of this constitution that was printed by Reader's Digest in a compilation. And so I've reproduced that here. And then we get into an extension, extrapolation of permanent revolution, because Leon Trotsky talked about permanent revolution, like world revolution and all that, but he wasn't the original, conception of permanent revolution. The anarchists talked about permanent revolution before that. He borrowed the concept and elaborated it into, a revolutionary movement. Okay, well, it can continue to be extrapolated into a permanent revolution that includes national minorities, and that's what I've done there. And in 1988, I wrote a manifesto of the Jewish PLO, okay, after working for the PLO myself. And that's there as well. And then I set up a topology comparing English, Arabic, and French in terms of the concepts, the terms used to describe, various concepts and how they compare to each other, dividing them into 2 categories, nation and the state. And that explains a lot there. Then there's human rights documentation for national minorities using the work of Dr. Cly, a Panther academic, who lived here in Canada and wrote enormously. Then there's a French article that I wrote, and the Abrahamic tradition. Yeah, and there's a leaflet, Note to War and Terror, and my presentation at the Palestinian University in Nablus and Najah, which is very rare, to have a Jewish person speaking at a Palestinian university. One of the Jewish Israeli journalists, Amir, she had been invited to speak at a university, and because of the protests from the students, she was disinvited. That's how difficult it is to get in, to speak at a university, but I did. Now here's strategies. Yeah, Judaism Unchained, and I expose, how the original Judaism was transformed into, national chauvinism that was used by Protestantism to justify its own national chauvinism. Constitution defense of freedom of expression. Yeah, that's to defending myself, because I was imprisoned, for writing and a Free Palestine on a Zionist poster that cost $2.01. So there it is. It's all there. That's originally 10 years of work and more than that even subsequently, for the additional sort of abstract there on strategies and Judaism Unchained. So,
I want to tell you that took a lot of. I can see why it took you many, many years to put that together because there's so many concepts that you had to flesh out, expand upon, be critical of, and to make a cohesive theory that
oh,
uh, it took quite a bit of work to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Right.
can get a share here. I'm sort of blocked. Maybe if I diminish the size of the screen.
Okay.
No, I'm caught.
Oh, you're
I'm
okay. I can see.
trapped.
Your profile's still there.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Managed. Okay. Now we can end the recording.
Well, I hope that everybody who was all of our viewers um reckon I think you're very lucky to have someone who's written such a thorough and intellectually honest document show you how it was done and break it down. Because most times we never get a chance to do that. You might
Yeah.
see the book the person publishes after they've written the dissertation, but the process of creating it, putting forth the arguments and counter arguments. I just want to thank you very much and congratulate you for the work that you did to produce this.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for your remarks.
Yeah, you're
It's
welcome.
rather
Welcome.
rare, to receive any sort of, appreciation for the work that
Well,
I've done.
well, no, I mean being in this not being in that intellectual academic world, which is much different than the world of the practitioners, much different world.
Yeah.
Um, there's certain things that go on that you people just don't know that you
Yeah.
have to go through in order to create the product that you're seeking. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that and would love to get a chance to go over some of the more details with you, either privately or on maybe some more targeted and focused editions of
Mm.
Here and Now.
Yeah.
You know.
And this stuff, of course, is not even allowed into the universities.
Oh
I'm not
no,
allowed to teach. Like
no,
I used to teach at York University in Toronto, but since I worked at the Palestine Embassy during the war of 1982, 85, I haven't been able to get any teaching.
yeah,
Also, maybe because I was imprisoned there in Ottawa, for the peace camp protests.
right. Well,
Universities are afraid of people who have been in prison. Like it's sort of a way in which they can filter you out.
Abraham, I hate to say, I'm so sick of that.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, um, whether one is guilty or innocent, and you still serve the time, that is your past. That is not your future. And that shadow of that tree has to be cut down to the roots so that shadow doesn't impact where you're headed. And I
yeah,
don't even have to like what you went to jail for. Oh, I don't. But once you serve your time, it is morally bankrupt to have that tree of the past shadowing your future.
yeah,
It's just like a job reference. Oh, your reference didn't check out. So what? I still have the skill. I
yeah,
still have the capacity to do this. So I want to tell you, and it's something that's one of the few things that will trigger me is this past deal. Oh, you did time in prison, and your point is,
yeah,
what's your point? Okay, that's true. And what's that say about my capacity to make contribution to society, or for you to put me on your faculty, or to employ me in a position? Has nothing to do with anything. It's just social bias.
yeah,
It's just political and social bias and overt discrimination. So
yeah,
thank you for raising that because it's something that I'm thoroughly sick of in our world. He's an
yeah,
ex so I'm sorry.
yeah,
What are they doing now? Let's talk about the now and not the past. The
yeah,
past may influence, the past may not. what's it? So I thank you for doing this and sharing this with us today on Here and Now.
Mhm. I mean,
Thank
my thesis is available for free, of course, at the academia.edu site there, as well as the other books and writings. But what I was imprisoned for in Ottawa was the first thing was when the an American subsidiary in Toronto was building the guidance system for the cruise missile, which the United States had exclusively at the time in 1984. And so we had a demonstration against the cruise missile being developed in Canada like that with the local peace movement. And after the demonstration went on off, from the headquarters of the Litton Corporation in Ottawa, I went up to the front wall, a glass wall, and spray painted "No Cruise." And so then the security and the police, came running out, chasing me down the street. They finally caught up with me in front of the Parliament building, and they took me into custody in a police car. And then all the young anarchists surrounded the police car and they wouldn't let it leave. And it caused like this minor riot in front of the Parliament buildings there in Ottawa. But I was finally imprisoned and charged, with the mischief of private property. Okay, there was no damage, but nonetheless, okay. So I was in prison for that. Then I was imprisoned again for setting up the peace camp. And many of the charges, were just dismissed by the court, because they weren't at all valid. In Canada, the lawn in front of the Parliament building is public grounds. It's a public park, because the English Revolution of 1850 transformed crown lands into the common lands. Okay, so same thing applies in Canada because it was part of the British Empire, right? So, like I was able to set up, the peace camp legally for political purposes, which gave it a justification for continuing its presence there. And the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, couldn't get rid of us. So they charged me with other stuff, and I did some time for that. And then after they destroyed the peace camp under the Conservative government that came in after the Pierre Elliott Trudeau government of the Liberals, went down, and we were one reason why they went down. Okay, so the Conservative government comes in, and they promise that they won't, take down the peace camp in the election campaign because we were very popular, like 80% popular support amongst the population because Canadians didn't want to have an American missile, nuclear capable missile, in the country and being used in tests, being shot towards, the north during the wintertime as if it was going to attack the USSR by going over the North Pole. Okay, so what they did is they destroyed the peace camp because they wanted the United States to attack the USSR. Okay, so I did a bit of prison time for that as well. Then, in retaliation for having our peace camp destroyed, me and Yvonne Dubé, the chef de Quebec, went up there one night, the day after Canada Day, when everything was quiet. The RCMP had withdrawn and everything was supposed to be back to normal. And the Canadian coat of arms, is sculpted into the base of the Peace Tower there in front of the Parliament building. And on one side of the Canadian coat of arms is this lion with a British, flag above its head, and a crown denoting the British Empire. And the other side, was a unicorn with underneath a flag denoting the French monarchist symbol, the fleur-de-lis. And this unicorn had a crown around his throat, like a work collar, and had a chain attached to it that, was shown to go down the side of the body of the unicorn. So he went up there and he broke the stone of the chain off the unicorn and liberated the unicorn in effect. That got me, mischief to public property, criminal mischief to public property. And that was, 3 months in prison. After the judge heard, what it was, the judge was Quebecois, French, French speaking. So when he heard, the reason why we had done the mischief there, the whole scene changed. All of a sudden he said, "Oh, yeah, well, that's nothing. You can do that. I don't mind." And even the prosecutor, like when he heard that, jumped up and said, I called for a retraction of the charges. The prosecutor wanted, the charges to be thrown
Wow.
out. It
Wow.
was incredible because he was Quebecois also. Like, all of a sudden, this little Quebecois revolt happened in the middle of the court. So the judge,
That must have been something to see. That must have been a scene right there.
oh yeah, like it should have been, videotape, but it's,
Yeah, that needs to have been videotaped. That right there. Yep, sure
the
needs to be.
incredible scene. So then, I was, given the criminals, the judge had to give me some time, because people thought I was going to be put away for 2 years. And my landlady actually threw out all of my personal possessions, including all my lecture notes from New York
Oh, oh,
University.
oh, oh.
Like it was a disaster personally for
Yeah.
me. So,
Yes.
I was signed, given a sentence of only 3 months, but I had already been in prison, like for about a month. So that was deducted, at double time because it was prior to sentencing. So 2 months, were wiped out. So it was 1 month left. And then, I told the judge, that I was living in Montreal by this time. I told the judge, that I was a candidate, for the mayor of Montreal, which I was. And I needed to be, like free, to do my electoral campaign. So the judge said, okay, just do weekends, and leave me alone. Enough is enough. So, I practically did no time for that whatsoever, but it's still recorded as being 3 months prison time. So that's what my prison time is all about, the full disclosure right there and then. So
There you
is that
go.
a reason for me not to be able to teach in university?
No.
I don't think so. No.
As a matter of fact, it should be reason for you to be teaching in the university.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, so that's it. Okay, so we continue on, and our work our work here talking and presenting this information is, I think, really crucial because nobody else is doing this kind of analysis.
nobody else
Or,
is doing the analysis. Tell me how many demonstrations have been in the world against the Iran war except in Iran?
yeah,
Very few.
really
Very
bad.
few. So we're, in Iran, yeah. Outside the world, I'm not saying that people are sleeping, but in many of the other major capitals, this is being forgotten. And Gaza is being forgotten. And the West Bank is being forgotten. And it can't be forgotten, people. We cannot forget what's going on. Okay, it's our responsibility to sit up, stand up, get involved, and spread the truth. That's all we have to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, exactly. That's like the reggae song that you were singing there. Yeah, that was great. Okay. Uh, so we're here, we're available. You can pick up the logic and carry it forward, everybody
That's what
there.
you have to do. Carry it forward.
And
Yep.
what we're doing is called critical analysis. And, so many other podcasts don't do that. They're presenting information that people will please people, fun stuff, that they're talking about. And, in order to stimulate the number of click likes
Yep.
that is
Yep.
what
Yep.
what they're after, like they want, like big readership, they want 10,000, 100,000, like listeners, and then they're happy, that's all that they're going for, well, that's not the point.
Not the point. Okay. Until next time.